ICQ Podcast episode 478, QRP Labs Q&A. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to the 478th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly name subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3, Bravo, and Leslie, Golf Zero, Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOA, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is our first of our manufacturer Q&As, where we are joined by Hans Summers of QRP Labs to answer your questions. Now, as always, it's your very valuable donations of value that you send our way that keep our show advert free. We'd like to thank, of course, our monthly subscription donors for, supporting the work of the ICQ podcast. If you get value and enjoyment from today's show, we ask you to consider supporting us by going to ICQPodcast.com/donate, where, as I say, whatever value you send back our way, we would greatly appreciate. And as I say, we'd ask you to consider doing that. So that's ICQPodcast.com/donate. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank, Bill and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including Hams collect data on blizzards and the RSG president to contest. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the ICQ Podcast, episode 478. And tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. Hi, guys. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, good to see you. And yeah, I saw you Monday, so good to work you as always. Also, my side of the pond, who likes to get me in as much trouble as he can, because it's great fun, isn't it, Martin?
You need no help getting yourself into trouble.
Yeah, it's our Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Hello.
Hello. Listen, I don't know why, but you asked me to be the best man at your wedding, you know.
And you got yourself in trouble there as well, didn't you?
Oh, I did, yeah. Totally. Is Emma still talking to me?
I have no idea.
All right. Okay. Moving to the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Frank Hell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin. Hey, everybody. Great to be here again.
Yeah, great to have you as always, Frank. Your side of the pond, we got Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Martin. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good impersonation of me. He's here shortly. But we've missed you a few times because I know you've been extremely busy with work, Bill, but great to have you here tonight. And last but not least, he is with us, back by popular demand, Leslie, G0CIB, Leslie Butterfields. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. Good to be on.
Oh, dear. We have fun doing these.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I've spoke to a number of listeners and they've said, guys, you really sound as though you have fun, and we do. And
can you put the outtakes on one and sort of an hour of the outtakes, and the listeners will just be cracking up?
They would, but we took a lot.
We might lose our rating. We
definitely lose our ratings. And in fairness, I did say we don't keep the bloopers. However, the only blooper we have, Leslie, is of you, and you know about it.
And let me add, Martin, and it was a very ethical blooper.
Well, that was one of them. The other one was when Leslie was doing the experiment.
Now, I've got a feeling that was actually a different podcast.
That was a different podcast, but we do still have it.
Oh, right. Okay. Well,
can I just say, I have got another one as well of you trying to pronounce someone's name.
Me?
And getting very angry about it as well. You kept getting it wrong.
You're going to get in trouble. Let's move on before we get in trouble.
Yeah, I think we ought to move on. But yeah, we don't keep bloopers because, in fairness, we probably wouldn't get a lot of the interviews we get, because if people thought we were going to make them look silly, poke fun at them, even
but
though
we
we
can
poke
make
fun
ourselves look silly.
Oh, of course we can.
We don't have to. We already are. So.
That's right. Yeah. There's no proof necessary. It's self-evident, just like our Constitution.
Moving along, Martin.
Let's get moving. Okay, first news story. Hams help forecast a real-time data on the northeast blizzard. Now, that happened about a week or so ago, I believe, and it was phenomenal what went on. Looking at it here, 350,000 customers lost power in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. The snowfall there was 37.8 inches. Now, that's almost up to your waist. That's frightening. Frank, what do you think on this one?
And now, turning to our live reporter in eastern Pennsylvania, Bill Barnes.
I waved from my mountaintop eastwards towards the Poconos as that storm went through. We lost the state of New Jersey for a couple days completely, and it was a what we call a nor'easter. So this is a winter storm that comes from the south up along the Atlantic. They sometimes diverge inland, hit my house pretty good. So 30 inches of snow is not unusual, the nor'easter. It's just we haven't gotten them in quite a few years. Well, this one went a little further east, got New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, eastern part of Canada. It was pretty brutal. But article he sent out highlighted the local Aries teams were also involved in the National Weather Service Skywarn program. This is a program of trained spotters. I am in the Skywarn program, and they teach you how to take measurements and proper ways to collect it, and basically report in the data. Most folks nowadays either do the web submission or they text the National Weather Service their readings with their Skyward spotter numbers. But this was interesting to me because they actually activated nets on amateur radio and took reports and then collected them all together and then sent them in as a unit bundle to the local National Weather Service offices for them to help their forecast. But the real important part about the Skywarn program is it actually helps train the National Weather Service folks when they're looking at their Doppler 88 radars and they see things, they can associate, okay, this on the screen I'm seeing right now ends up being 2 inches of snow an hour, or this ends up being a heavy thunderstorm with hail, or this one ends up being a tornado, or this one ends up being a downburst. Because of those reports, it helps the folks that are actually doing the forecasting be able to read the weather radars a little bit better. And the article went pretty descriptive on all the reporting they did, but really it is a really great program to help out our National Weather Service here in the States so that they make better forecasts and understand what they're seeing on the computer screens from the radar system.
Martin, I'll jump back in. I didn't want to be guilty of bringing coals to Newcastle, so to speak. I knew that was right up where Bill was located. But let me dovetail. Bill did an outstanding job overviewing that. It's like any set of sensors or models based upon sensor data. You kind of always need to validate or ground truth it, as the case may be. One of the problems we have here in the U.S., we have a great program as a concept, and you'll hear people argue. In fact, there was a YouTube video that made the rounds this past week, is that Aries and races are dead, and the guy went on and on and on. And whether he was right or whether he was wrong is another issue. The problem is you have some Skywarn programs and Aries nets in some areas that are outstanding, and this is one of them. I happen to be involved with Skywarn, like Bill, trained Skywarn spotter. I've got a number. They'll believe me that it's a 1/4 inch hail, if I have that number with it. Other people, they may not. And so the Jackson Weather Office, we work with them and have worked with them for a number of years. And here's what happens. Personnel in the National Weather Service vary. Some go, bah humbug, I don't need no stinking hams telling me what my radar says. Others say, I'd love to have you work with me. So while there's a national MOU with the Weather Service for ARES, local offices vary. And when there's a new director in a Weather Service office, you sort of have to renegotiate that relationship. We have one that comes and goes a little bit here. We have some directors that come in and some retire, some move on, some get promoted. We have a pretty good one here right now. And ours is more severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. And we might every several years get some snow, but nothing like the nor'easter that Bill was talking about. So we have a lot of variability in how well this works. They have gone to NWS Chat, which is an online collection system that allows a couple of things to happen. Because keep in mind, you have TV weather people that are also monitoring this so they can get it into their own screen weather forecast. And they're reading the mail, if you will, on the NWS Chat. They kind of don't have time to talk live to a ham operator. So things have modernized more from the voice nets, although we still use those as Bill described. So with a country this large and a topography this different and the prevailing weather patterns that different, things are different across the country and you get a little more success than others. This was clearly a dramatic success. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as you guys have pointed out, for us in the UK, this would be phenomenal weather. I mean, I'm still old enough to remember the winter of 1963 that literally brought the UK to a standstill, and I don't think we had as much snow as you had there. So that took us out for about 6-8 weeks. That was a worrying one. Leslie, what do you think on this one? You know, the hams did pretty good, I thought.
Well, looking at this article, you just sort of say to yourself they're doing a great job. You know, nobody wants to use these systems. You actually don't want them to be in use. You want them to practice, get your procedures right. But if they're needed, and in this case they certainly will, and they certainly did a fine job. I think the other two contributors really sort of explained how the system works and how it gives sort of on-the-spot data to people like the television studios and the meteorologists, actual data to what's happening on the ground. And to my mind, that's actually invaluable. So good on them. I think it's absolutely great. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think you're right. If, we need to we all want data, we all want good data and we want to know about it. And if people are given the right data, they can prepare for heavy problems like heavy snowfall and things like that in advance, I would suggest. Martin, what do you think?
Do you know, it's just listening to, I mean, we've talked about like these nets and things before, and I think I've asked the question of, you know, how effective are they? Listening to what Bill and Frank have been saying, I had no idea that these things fed into other things and that like TV weather forecasters used the data and stuff that they were collating to help sort of understand their maps and things like that. They mentioned in the news story that obviously amateur radio has become to the rescue to help with comms and things like that. 43 inches of snowfall. That's like three and a bit feet, something like that. It's incredible. They talk about, you know, a lot of people say they rely on like mobile phones and things for comms. I'm like, yeah, that only works if you've got your network working, doesn't it? But it just sounds like that they've provided some very valuable communication at the times when it was needed the most, when all else fails.
Yeah, certainly. And with 350,000 homes without power, you know, the amateur radio community would have helped out, I think, quite a bit there. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah, so I agree with everyone said, really, not much more to add on this one. But absolutely, I think this is one of those situations where, you know, we can, you know, yeah, great, people can communicate by the internet, they can send in reports that way, and if that works, fantastic. But when the power fails, when the internet or the networks go down, you know, the cell phone goes down, etc., amateur radio is the backup, isn't it? It's the ultimate backup. We know we can always get on the air with a simple car battery and a piece of wire as an aerial and a radio, and we can always get through. And that's where it's a great thing to have. So, and yeah, in this situation, when you've got, awful weather with massive amounts of snow, etc., then I think our hobby can really come in and be of real service to the community. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say this one, Martin.
Yeah, fine business, Chris. Not a problem on that one. And I think that just proves our usefulness to society. Next news story. It's kind of sad, but it's kind of pleased that people are stepping up to the mark. The gentleman who produced Hamclock died about a month ago, and this is a terrific piece of software that I've certainly used, and certainly, if you have it running in an event, people will stop and look at this Hamclock map. It fills a whole screen, a whole computer screen. It's something phenomenal. But I know you've used it, Frank, so I'm going to pass it to you this time because I know you've used it. What's your thoughts on this one?
I have used Hamclock. In fact, I bought a couple of the Innovato, which is a third-party company that bought little small computers, and they made a turnkey operation. And they were about $50 US. And people were really drawn to it. It was inexpensive. It allowed you to make some customizations to put your call sign, your location. If you wanted DX reports, you could identify, say, Europe from the States or Australia or something like that. You could put satellites on it, and you could put the solar. And it's just a lot of things that you could do. And it came in under the premium product Geochron, which I had been a beta tester for Patrick and the Geochron company out in Portland. And it's a marvelous product, commercial product, small computer. If you've got a 4K monitor, it knock your eyes out. And I forget the name, but there's a fellow in the United Kingdom that has some neat software that I've purchased and used. It's a little more technical to maintain and this kind of thing. And so Hamclock hit that sweet spot where it wasn't a total appliance. You got to change things up in it, but it just worked. And what was really neat is it would operate headless. So you didn't have to have a small screen or a dedicated screen to it. You could access it via a browser that would automatically scale to the monitor that it was on. And I used it that way. And so I have a couple of computers in my shack and then one here at my desk where I'm speaking at the moment. And if I wanted to monitor things, I would just take a browser tab and point it to that internal IP address. So when that went away, and it was very unfortunate, but that's always not well planned, as the saying goes. And some hams got in gear, and a group created a free back-end server where the data come from. And now a second group has reconstituted the original server at a different address with just one command to change your existing Hamclock to point to that new server. And I'll leave the rest of it to the other presenters, but I found it to be one of those items that once you have it, you really miss it if it's not working.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank. When we were doing trial of libraries on the air last year, Hamclock was one of the things we had running, and it's a showstopper. It stops the general public. What's that? And they come across.
And Martin, about the time this happened, I was on the way to taking one of my two Innovato machines and post it into the library, and they were getting a glass case so it wouldn't walk off.
Yeah.
For display. And I'm with you. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Martin, any thoughts on the Hamclock? Have you ever played with it?
Do you know what? I've not played with it. It's one of those things. It's been like we say, a lot of things. It's been on my to-do list. Of like, at some point I need to get around to setting this up. It looks to be an absolutely fantastic tool. And it's like, I wanted it to do a couple of things, and I don't know. I never really looked into it further. I thought if it can do that, then absolutely, I'm going to dedicate a monitor to that. I'm going to put that in my shack, run it on a Pi or whatever, and be done with it. But like a lot of things, time has just got away from it, and I've never got round to doing anything with it. Obviously, the news came out about the guy that developed it. But they do say here that they've developed, the users have developed a free back-end server. And I don't want to be negative about this, because obviously people want to keep this project running. They've developed this server. As you rightly know, running the Digital Talk group, servers cost money. Not just electricity, but internet costs. You know, if you're in a data center, you've got to pay for the data that goes through it. If you're running it from your house, you've got to obviously pay for your internet connection and whatever. Obviously, the more users you get, the more data is going to go across it, the bigger servers you're going to need. Part of me wonders, how long will this be free for? It almost needs to be, and maybe it is, maybe because I've not used it, I don't know. It almost needs to be the majority of it runs on your own computer and then calls the data from a variety of sources like your DX cluster.
That's what happens, Martin. That's exactly what happens. That's what the back-end server is.
Okay. So it's not a server that runs in a data center that you would connect to?
Not really at all, yeah.
There we go then. In which case, this is definitely worth a look.
Well, I thought you'd be excited about that one.
I'm very excited. I'm gonna try. I've got a spare monitor sitting right beside me here. I might give that a go.
Well, how about waiting until we finish recording, Mike?
Hang on, I've lost the clean feed. Hold on.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. Chris, have you had a play with Hamclock?
I haven't. It looks interesting. I guess what I'm thinking is this not a web page? Could someone who's not just create this on a web server somewhere and just having to install it on your machine locally? Don't know. I'm guessing you can create some sort of API backend. I don't think it would cost a massive amount of money to run the back end. So Martin's concerns there. Hopefully people will donate towards doing it. That's what I would hope. I would hope people.
What happens, Chris? If I can interject to help, is that there's two ways of going about it. You can have a local Raspberry Pi or some other whatever, and you can even run it on WSL on Windows, in the Linux portion. And I've done that. I actually forgot for a moment that I have an instance running that way. You can either have each individual client go out to all these different, places that PSK Reporter and whatever, and you're going to generate a whole lot of heat on those servers. Or you can have an intermediary server that, say, once an hour or once every clock cycle of whatever that you set, it'll go get the data, and then you point to it from your client and get that. And that's two models. And that's what this back-end server was doing, was sucking in those particular data points, and then you called what you wanted from the Hamclock server. So I'll back out of here, but that's kind of what was happening.
Thanks for the explanation, Frank. That's interesting. So it's great someone's put this back on the air and done it for free. I think, as per Martin's point, it may be that they may need to make a small charge. There may be some hosting costs there that they might need to cover, and that's only fair enough, isn't it, if someone's providing a service? So I wish them all the best of luck. It sounds like it's potentially interesting and useful thing to have.
Yeah, it certainly does. Well, I used to have it running on my Linux computer until I replaced the computer and I never installed it again. It was one of the things I was going to do and never got around to. Bill, final words on this one? Have you used it?
Yeah, I've used Hamclock before. I really wasn't too much into it. And it's good that someone came out with this replacement backend. That's really good. What I jumped on, because it's both live on the web or you can put it on the Pi, is Open Hamclock. It's a GitHub project, and openhamclock.com, and it's pretty much the same kind of thing. I have it running just because I have the spots filtered. It's like I can see where the DX is coming in at. So it's just another view for what's that, Frank? PSK Reporter or something that we use. Yeah.
And it'll do Whisper. I mean, most of them will do that too.
Yep. So there's options now, and it's nice that folks have picked up on this and provided options.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bill. I think you're right. But I would say it would be a shame to lose this application because it's a great piece of work. Moving on to our next news story, and I thought the boys were going to tell me, no, we shouldn't run this. It is interesting. It doesn't, on the face of it, sound as though it's much to do with radio, because there's some drones that have caught video, capturing video in East Texas of a hot air balloon rescue at 1,100 feet. The radio part is the air balloon is impaled on a radio tower, and they're trying to get these people down from the radio tower. I thought this was quite interesting. Now, Leslie, I know you saw this one and you were getting quite excited about it.
Martin, I'm not keen on heights at all. I went in the loft the other day and that was about as much as I could do. Anyway, I'm looking at this video and with the drones flying around and this hot air balloon basically torn to bits but hanging on there, so to speak. And they got these ropes, guy lines tied to the hot air balloon. And I thought, no. I was absolutely astonished. And I don't know how many fire people. There was a number of a team of them that managed to get the man and the woman down. I'm just trying to see how 35 members of the fire department responded, and you could not pay me enough money to do that job. I went, no way. But apparently they was rescued safe and sound with no injuries. So yeah, there's a good outcome. But I would not like to do their job for anything. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough many moons ago to have a flight in a hot air balloon as a corporate customer of one of the big computer companies in the UK, and they took me up in it. From what I remember, and I was only a passenger, but from what I remember, you only got one control. Put more heat in with the burner into the balloon, it goes up, and it gradually comes down. Then you put more heat in, it goes up, and you're blown wherever it decides by the wind. So I'm wondering whether they run out of fuel and they couldn't get the burner to burn quick enough to get a higher. But that's quite frightening when you look at the pictures. So yeah, Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, again, I'm also not a fan of heights. Martin, you recall a couple of times we've been to Fruity's Harbour and we've been at the tower in the harbour there, and I've got about a third of the way up and decided, I'm not going any further. So I remember Edmund being at the top last time we went with his handheld, putting a few contacts out or putting a few calls out on 2 meters and having a chat with some of the folks in the area. But no, heights are definitely not my thing. I've never been in a hot air balloon. Not sure I'd like it. Not sure, but no, I mean, the video, I'm sure it'll go on the website somewhere on our news section, is amazing. You know, there's drone footage there of this rescue, and scary stuff. I don't know. It mentions about there's a number of different transmitters on this tower. So cellular services, public safety, as well as I think broadcast as well. I don't know if any of that stuff had to get turned off. I don't know if there's any RF issues about having that on while you got rescuers up there and people hanging from a rather broken looking balloon. So I don't know if it affected any of those services while the rescue was up, kind of in progress. But or if anything got damaged. But obviously the most important thing was that those folks got rescued, and sounds like the local fire department did a great job in getting those people down. So yeah, it all ended well, but it could have been a lot worse, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit worrying. So, Martin, before I give it to our American boys, you any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the video, and there's not only is the drone filming it, you can see at least 2 or 3 other drones around as well, capturing it as well, which I presume are to do with the rescue, the rescue team, so they can see what's going on rather than like a news service or anything. It's amazing how calm. Sort of the balloon was hanging on this thing, and the basket was several feet out. They'd obviously tethered it off. It's just how calm the guy that's just still in the basket is. He's just sort of sitting there like, yeah, okay, I'll be over whenever, He's quite happy. People are hanging on the tower. Obviously, they train for this kind of thing. But looking at the tower, it was a tower that had various services on it for 105.7 KXFM. It was running 100 kilowatts ERP, as well as various translators, or relays, as we call them in the rest of the world. So there's multiple FMs up there. So yeah, RF is probably something that they would need to have considered when they were going up there. I have seen people, obviously shouldn't be, but people climbing radio towers and waving like a flag next to the one of the transmitting antennas, and the flag just caught light as it obviously earthed or arced or something across. And certainly with 100 kilowatts, which is crazy power for concept, stations in London run about 4 kilowatts. You know, I wouldn't want to be climbing that. So I would imagine before the fire crew and what have you were allowed on the tower, they probably had to either turn those transmitters off, switch to backups, or just turn the power down or whatever. I know when people climb past them, they generally cool down to the ground and they turn the power onto those radio bays onto low power as they go past. But yeah, it was interesting. Fortunately, the where they got stuck wasn't next to the antennas. You can actually see when the drone looks down, you can see the Syrah bays below. So it wasn't right next to an FM broadcast antenna. But yeah, it's scary stuff. And yeah, my mum's been in a hot air balloon. I remember her telling me it was a similar thing. I think you said, you know, it's up or down, and you go where the wind wants you to go. And if the wind wants you to go towards the radio tower, then that's what happens. I guess that's why they check the weather and stuff beforehand to get an understanding of where they're going to go. But I can only presume in this state, like you say, they ran out of gas.
And we have the expert on the call, don't we? Leslie, I'm sure, could work out the expert. Leslie needs spreadsheet in terms of RS safety. 100 kilowatts, 10 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts.
100 kilowatts at 105.7.
At pretty close range, probably wouldn't FM.
No, you don't want to be near it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Bill, what's your thoughts on this one? I mean, it's from your country, although it's a lot further south than you, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone covered it really well. I mean, the only comment I had is when I was reading this last night and I watched a video. That's scary. 4 hours pull these folks off the tower. Very, very frightening. I'm glad everybody's okay.
Oh, yeah. So, Frank, have you had a go in a hot air balloon, and what's your thoughts on this one?
I've had a very small go, and it was in North Carolina. My son was a small child, and there was a hot air balloon at a fair or something that we were at, and we went up maybe 25 feet, and one of the master anchors was never unleashed, so we were never going to go all the way up. And if you're not familiar with that, that'll get your adrenaline going. Well, of course, my little 4-year-old son was, let's go higher. In looking at this story, there was one thing that I think may have been involved. It says preliminary FAA briefing said the hot air balloon became entangled in a guy wire. Now, I vividly remember my wife and I sitting on top of what's called the Space Needle in San Antonio, and there are several of these around the country. There's one in Seattle. We've had dinner on top of that one as well. And it slowly turns around. So every hour you've made a 360-degree revolution around the top of that tower with a restaurant on the top. And I remember watching this little thin stream of smoke go straight up, and there was a fire. And I found out that it was almost 100 miles away from the news coverage in the newspaper of the next day. So we were there, and you could see 100 miles. Now, that's San Antonio, which is south central Texas. East Texas is a little hillier. Here's my point. I wonder if what happened is the navigator in the hot air balloon simply didn't see the guy wire, saw the tower, but maybe didn't see that particular guy wire and may have underestimated how much loft they needed. I'm not a pilot. I don't know. Glad they were safe. I will say this to our audience in the States. This reminded me of a story of the Lawn Chair Larry flight out in California back in the early 80s. This guy is one of these hold my beer and watch this things. He bought a bunch of weather balloons from a military surface store, 45 of them 8-foot balloons, harnessed them to a lawn chair, got a 6-pack of beer, a CB radio, a pellet gun, some sandwiches, and so on, and a camera. And he let her rip, and he got up to 16,000 feet. And an airline pilot called in, to the nearest control center and says, "I've not been drinking, I promise, but I just passed a guy in a lawn chair." So I don't think this story may have been quite as dramatic as the lawn chair Larry story, but it really got a lot of people's attention. And it just goes to show you that nothing's completely safe, and just great work by the emergency people to take their time and get these folks down. And as Martin Rothwell said, how did the two people in the balloon basket remain so calm?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's my experiences, two things I'll tell you about my balloon flight. Number one, we're going up and down, and the pilot said, "Look, I tell you what, you don't see very much when you're high up." And we were, I suppose, getting lower and lower, and we came across into a field or just above a field that had just been harvested. All the corn had been cut off. And it was early evening, and there were hundreds of rabbits in this field. And he said, "Just be quiet a minute." And he got down to about 6 foot off the ground, and he fired the burners. And you just see the whole field just moved. All these rabbits went everywhere. It was hilarious. The other one is, when a balloon comes into land, it doesn't always just sit the basket straight down. Often it'll tip the basket over. So, if you're thinking of having to go in a hot air balloon, they don't just land with a basket. Not like to take off. Often they'll tip over and you have to hang on until it stops moving. Anyway, that's another story. Move on to our next news story. Listen out for the RSGB president. He's going to operate as GB5CC. That's Bob Beebe. And Chris and I met Bob over in Friedrichshafen, and we also met him at National Hamfest last year. Do you want to go first, Chris?
Yeah, I can do. So, absolutely. So Bob is going to be operating on this this year's Commonwealth contest, a GB5CC, and he's doing it as a kind of memorial to the previous President Bob Whelan G3PJT, who sadly passed away at the end of last year. So he's sort of doing it as a nod to Bob. But he's hoping to make lots of contacts in the contests. And, these guys, even though he's the president, he's still an amateur, he still gets on the air and he can still work him. So, give it a go.
Yeah, I thought Bob was a nice guy. We met him the first time we met him was in Friedrichshafen. And I don't think he was quite prepared to see about 8 orange shirts suddenly appear in front of him. But that was good. That was good. Leslie, you got any thoughts on this one?
Well, Martin, I think it's good to sort of show respect to people that contribute to an organisation. Honestly, contests aren't my game, but I'm sure other people will be delighted to work GB5CC. Myself, I'm not a contest guy, so I think I'll give that one a miss, Martin.
Yeah, no problems if you're not into the contest, and I'm not a contester. What I will say, though, guys, and certainly for the UK, and now if you're a podcast listener in the UK, I'm saving your bacon. The 15th of March, a week Sunday, is Mother's Day. Do not forget your mother if you'll be in serious trouble.
Martin, thanks for the reminder. I was panicking. I thought it was this weekend. It's not. It's the weekend after. Thank you.
It's the weekend.
Still got time.
Yeah.
Still got time to sort it out. Very good.
You have. Okay, move over to the States. Frank, I know this is a UK story, but at least our president's having a go, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And it's in memory of a former RSGB president, Bob Whelan, G3PJT, became a silent key last year. And I just think that's a very nice gesture by the president, Beebe, to operate in memory of one of his predecessors who passed on. So good. That's a good thing. And I hope a lot of hams try to work him during this contest.
Yeah. British Science Week starts the Friday before the podcast goes out and goes through to Sunday the 15th, Mother's Day again. This is an event in the UK that the RSGB with amateur radio are trying to promote, because it does promote STEM and a lot of other things. But British Science Week happens every year, and it tries to bring science to youngsters and families alike. Leslie, you know about this?
Well, Martin, I think British Science Week is a good idea. Anything that gets the hobby of amateur radio out there. Yes, it's got the STEM aspect, which is really, really good, about science, technology, engineering and maths. And it's to do with new audiences and the RSGB involved. And I do know that the RSGB supports things like this. When we had our local club and they sent us the, shall we say, the paraphernalia, the material that we could do the show with, and we were very grateful for that. It's getting the whole thing is about getting the hobby of amateur radio out there, and that's a good thing. And I think there's quite a number of clubs involved: the Chelmsford Amateur Radio Society, the Lincoln Portable Radio Group, Crowthorne and Woking Without Men's Shed, and Bracknell Amateur Radio Club, and the South Derbyshire and Ashby Woods Amateur Radio Group. Sorry if I mispronounce that, but there's certainly quite a few number of clubs being involved, which is a good thing for the hobby. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I'm glad when we promote ourselves and we show the public what we can do. Martin, are you going to look out for British Science Week?
Well, it's something that I wonder. It starts somewhat Friday the 6th of March, finishes on the 15th of March. How have we not heard of British Science Week anywhere else? I mean, maybe I've got my head under a rock. I don't know, but it's not just amateur radio. It's all sorts of stuff. How is nobody else shouting about this? But as it says, there's a number of clubs hosting stuff, including Chelmsford Amateur Radio Society. I did my foundation and intermediate with those guys, so there's definitely going to be some good stuff coming out of there. I'm sure of it. But yeah, looks like hopefully people get on air. If people are out promoting the hobby in any way,
it's a good thing.
Please ask for help. Yeah, it's a good thing. Please ask for help. You know, I'm sure there'll be people there. If you hear people calling, please don't just say 59 next. Give them a conversation. Yeah, just be nice. Don't say 59 next and start talking about your ailments. Just say hello. You know, especially if it's a younger person calling. You never know who's out there. They are the future of the hobby. But anything that gets people on air that promotes the hobby in a good way is definitely a good thing.
Oh yes. Well, I'm sure it does get promoted. It normally gets promoted through schools, and I'm surprised your good lady, being a teacher, hasn't had it to her school. Unless
she might have done, but she hasn't mentioned it to me. But
yeah, I appreciate that. But I think they talked a lot to schools and that on this. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, anything that helps us to promote the hobby, I think, is fantastic. I think amateur radio is science. I think there's a lot of science involved in our hobby. So if this, absolutely, if these clubs are going out there and demonstrating amateur radio to the public, then absolutely, if we can go along and help them, or if we can at least be on the radio to talk to them, that's going to be, people perhaps are having their first experience of radio, perhaps sending in greetings messages, that sort of thing. Then having a friendly person on either end of the radio is always very helpful, and it really helps to promote the hobby. So I think this is a win-win. I think people get to know about science, promote our hobby, and it will also, give the public something interesting to get involved with. So I think this is a good one.
Yeah, so do I. Lots can happen from this. Now, Bill, I know this is a UK thing, but do your schools have science weeks and things like that going on, or your university where you work? Do they have a science week event like this?
Yeah, but first, M0SGL59 QRZ contest. Anyway,
next.
I'm aware of some of the school districts have science weeks. I don't think it's this. Don't think it's right now. I think it's later in the school year. And we have a program. Frank's heard us before. Science in Motion. where folks at the university go out to elementary schools to basically show, I'm trying to remember exactly the whole list, but it's basically an experimental. They take out science lessons that are based around doing experiments to various areas. I know that's a thing.
The vet school at Mississippi State used to take a cow that had a porthole in his side, so he'd feed him an ice cream cone, and they could see it coming by. Now, good or bad on that, that's a good example for animal science doing that.
Okay. All right. I was thinking of the sublimation of, dry ice and from solid to gas, but okay.
Oh, that too.
But yes, in general, these things are going on. So it's nice that they're having a British Science Week, and I hope all of them work out really well with the clubs they're participating.
Yeah, so do I. I hope, but the people who put these on do a lot of work to get them on. Frank, last words on this one?
Well, let me give some applause to RSGB. I think here in the States, we tend to maybe wax egotistically about Professor Einstein and all who came after him, Stephen Hawking, and all the wonderful science we have here. But let's just remember a little history. British science is what gave rise to science in the U.S., and there are so many preeminent scientists from the universities in the United Kingdom. Just incredible history there, and it continues. I read a lot of work out of UK universities. So the British Science Week does something Bill described of things over here in the U.S. It's a little more hit or miss, just maybe because it's so much larger and less organized. And so I say good on the British Science Association for putting on British Science Week and the RSGB for participating. And I just think that's a tremendous thing. And as the other presenters have said, getting what we do out there within that stream of science, and that we're part of that, because frankly, it's one of the parts of science that particularly younger people can get access to directly. Parents may not want to put a Bunsen burner in the home, but you can get into amateur radio, and these kits that are being sent out to do some of this stuff, I think is a great mechanism. So I'll certainly give a round of applause for the RSGB and what they're doing in the UK on this.
Yeah, well, thanks for that one, Frank. And in fairness, I think British Science Week is worth noting. I know of it because I've promoted it a couple of times at the library, but it's one of those things. It's not as promoted as much as it could be. It would be nice if powers that be got it out to the general public. It probably goes into schools. People get it in the schools, and if they're not involved in it, then it doesn't move out from the schools. So that's my opinion. Okay, that concludes our news stories. Let's find out what the guy's been up to. Bill, I'm going to let you go first, just in case you have a hard stop and need to get away, because I know sometimes people are chasing you all the time. So what have you been up to, Bill, since the last time we spoke?
Yep, need to get children to sports here shortly, so thank you. Been a lot going on. So the biggest parts is my goal last year was to work 100 DXCC countries on Morse code. I did that. I got all the, confirmations in Logbook of the World. I ended up with 115 stations. So I sent away for my DXCC club, Century Club in CW, and I finally filled out the form for phone. So now I have DXCC on 3 different modes. Brought my whole country total up to 232 out of, I think it's 340. So I am slowly working the world. So that's exciting. Radio wise, lots of soda chasing. I finally hit 1,000 points in chasing soda stations. So I am a shack sloth. doesn't really sound that appealing. Worked a bunch of DX stations last time, including the KP5 The Expedition, and I'm listening to the Expedition on Beauvais right now, so that's one of the ones I need. So I will continue to try to chase them when I can until they're done with their Expedition here in a couple weeks. So a lot going on, a lot of activity, a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds like you have been busy, Bill, and congratulations on your certificates there. Frank, what have you been up to since the last time you spoke on the podcast?
Well, I'll begin by congratulating Bill. I was going to do the Wayne's World movie, We're Not Worthy, but mean that in all sincerity. Quite an accomplishment, Bill, so congratulations. I've been doing several things. I've got the galley proofs for my next article in Practical Wireless. It's on the Wavecaster Vertical. A couple of hams inspired me, and it's based on a carbon mask. Vertical, easy to build, put up, take down, goes into a little small zippered case. It'll be in the April issue, and it's designed for 40, 20, and 15. Works pretty easy there. Still doing the research on the viability of a program for activating local parks in the U.S. And I published some of that research on K4FMH.com, and there's more to come. It's been discussed a bit on Reddit and created a little bit of a wave there in terms of social media, and it's not pro or con on POTA. I think POTA is one of the most impactful programs we've had, certainly in the U.S. In long time. But there are a lot of people in urban areas that would really like local parks there. So I'm doing the research piece as part of a group that's just looking at whether or not it makes sense to try to bring local parks into a different program, since POTA said they don't want to do that. As part of this, I've launched a new research effort on where do hams live. Well, that may seem like a dumb question. Well, I know where they live. Well, but from a national point of view, I began to look at it. I've geocoded the December 31st, 2025 slice of the FCC database for hams and taken out those with expired licenses. Got all of them geocoded, and I've linked those individual amateur license locations, including yours, Martin, to census geographies, like are you in a metropolitan, micropolitan, or non-metropolitan area? Are you in an urban zone? Are you inside of a town or municipality or not? And what is your block group location? Now, block groups here in the U.S., if the listeners are not familiar with it, are the closest census geography to a neighborhood that we have. And so I've taken a lot of socioeconomic data that we have available for block groups. And while we may not have that measured for hams, like median income, how many work in a technology occupation, and so on, we do have characteristics there for their neighbors. Now, the other thing is I've used remote sensing data from the Land Use and Land Cover data system from a U.S. Geological Survey. Used to use some of that in class when I teach remote sensing. And so I've attached that to each ham record. What kind of landscape do they live on? Do they live near open water? Do they live on barren land? Do they live in a forest? Do they live in developed land? Or how intense is that development? And so on. And that's taken about a month of PC processing time. And the PC that I'm doing that on's got 256 gigs of RAM, two CPUs, 8 terabytes of NVMe disk for I/O. So for a non-commercial setting or non-university setting, it's not too bad. It's taken me a month to pull all that together, but it's beginning to give me the opportunity to really look at where hams are. And I think there'll be some surprises in that. And there'll be articles posted on my blog at K4FMH on where the hams are, and one will be coming out fairly soon. Still working on finalizing that ground plane vertical for 20 meters. The weather and timing has just not been good for me to finalize that, but that's certainly in the works. I'm preparing for an invited talk to Rat Pack in May. Rat Pack is an online group of people centered on the West Coast. They contacted me about my blog articles on POTA activation and activators, and some of that I've published, and they were very complimentary and wanted me to present some of that to their audience. And so I think May is the first opening they had. I also finally built out that GMRS radio with a BTEC 50 watt GMRS radio on a Go box. And I gave a little demonstration at the recent Jackson Amateur Radio Club meeting here. And a friend gave me a surplus UHF mag mount whip that I used. And I put a square of magnetic stainless steel on the top side of the Go box when it's laid down and open. Not all stainless steel is magnetic. It depends on how it's poured and what ingredients they use. But that antenna will just pop on there and stay there pretty sturdily. And it'll actually fit inside the ammo can that I use for the radio. So I've got that out and done, and also gave a talk to the Jackson Club about where GMRS licenses are located in the U.S. and Mississippi. Everybody was completely shocked at how many of those there are and how close and how many of their neighbors have GMRS licenses. We only have a few GMRS repeaters in the state, but 2 are here in South Jackson and 1 to the west of us in Vicksburg. So we've invited GMRS operators in the area to visit our club in the coming months and see if we can broker some sort of common community where we can work together, particularly on service projects. So, Martin, that's mostly what I've been up to since I've been on the podcast last time.
Yeah, well, I've seen some of your diagrams. I've had a preview look. You did show me some of them. It's very, very interesting, put it that way. I can imagine the amount of work you did to get that done. Leslie, what have you been up to since the last time you were on the podcast?
Oh, what have I been up to? Well, a couple of things. I finished off renovating that Morse key I was talking about a couple of sessions ago. So that's finally done. The 80-meter little CW transceiver is still on the bench, and I'm trying to get time to actually get on and do it. But that's not making the progress I would like. But the other 2 things are I've been taking a couple of courses at the local college, one on WordPress and the other one on Introduction to AI. So there was gaps in my knowledge on that, so I've and very, very interesting courses indeed. So I was quite pleased about doing them. And that's about it from me, Martin.
Well, as I think I said before, all knowledge is good knowledge. They can't take it off you, Leslie, and you can use it going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Martin, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
What have I been up to? I have been a few bits and pieces, actually. I've rediscovered DX Heat as quite a useful website to have running in the background while I'm working at home. And when some of the bands have been opening, I've been switching on Whisper and seeing what I can do on there. Actually, 10 meters has been quite open recently all around the world. And I've noticed, actually, just playing with the different antennas I've got, essentially 2 HF antennas. One is an off-center fed dipole for up to 80 meters. The other one is a Solarcon IMAX 2000, so a CB antenna that I had up at my parents' house, but it's up here. And I use that for 10 and 12 meters and what have you. And it works really, really well. It's a lot quieter than the long dipole, but it does pull in a lot more signals. It's particularly on 10, I guess, because it's a tuned antenna pretty much for 10 meters. But yeah, that's worked really well on Whisper, although I have noticed that it wasn't working as well. And I realized that the clock on my laptop is a Windows 10 laptop, which Microsoft have obviously withdrawn support for. So the clock syncing just isn't working. So I've resynced that and it suddenly started working again. So I've been playing with that. We've got some wireless lights at work. These are like uplighters that you put on the floor. And normally our lights, you link them via DMX, which is just like essentially it's a serial cable that goes between the lights and you can change the color and things like that. I wanted to make them wireless. So I bought a wireless transmitter for them. They do support it. And teaching myself how to understand that. If you can get your head around how the system works, it's actually really simple. But playing with the system and making it work in the first place and understanding how to program the lights to talk to this transmitter has been a little bit of a learning curve for me, because I can do it with the cabled system, no problem, but getting them to sync with the transmitter when you've only got 4 little digits on the screen to tell it what it's doing, that has been fun. But we've now got 8 uplighters in the office that you put around the edge, you switch the colour on and it just lights up the wall and makes your meeting room look less like a meeting room and more like an event space, which has been fun. The other thing I've been playing with is some SDR radios from around the world. This is from a website, rx-tx.info. You can go on there, and it seems to be mostly, I think, Kiwi SDR radios, and you basically get a world map with dots all over it. You click on one of those dots that tells you how many SDRs are in that area. You can zoom in, find an SDR, click on it, and connect to it. And some of them, you know, obviously listening to amateur radio stations and things like that. There's a couple that are listening to airband in particular areas. But the one that's the ones that have really caught my attention at the moment is the one that can receive medium wave broadcast. Obviously, in the UK, medium wave is going away, for whatever reason. But I've been listening to the SDRs in Australia. It is amazing how many AM radio stations are still broadcasting in Australia, and how packed the AM band is, and how good quality their AM transmissions are by comparison to anything that I've ever heard over here. It is incredible. But I've had some real fun just jumping around these different stations, not just in Australia, but around the world, and seeing what I can hear there. It's been pretty fun, especially as I don't always get a chance to come down to the shack here. When I'm looking after the kids and stuff, I can literally just sit with the laptop on my lap in the living room and have a bit of a tune around. So it's been it's been a bit of fun. Other than that, I don't think there's much going on. I've been on the talk group a little bit, not as much as I normally would, but other than that, it's been pretty quiet.
Yeah, I think we've all tried to be on the talk group, but I don't think we've been on as often as we ought. Not just you, Martin, me as well, but I know Chris has been on as well. Chris, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke on the podcast?
I think I mentioned on the previous episode that I was going to do a talk at work about amateur radio, so that I've now done that. I think actually went very well. I didn't get my main challenge was I only had 20 minutes to talk about the subject, and that's not a lot of time. And as you know, we can talk on a bit as amateurs, so I had to be really strict and disciplined about what I talked about. So I kind of did a little bit about the background of what the hobby is, a little bit of history, and then kind of just did a bit of a brief tour of the hobby, talking about different aspects like, SSTV, satellites, DXing, contests, just trying to sort of give a flavour of what it's all about. And then I went on to a little bit about how what the hobby's done for me, sort of thing. So a little bit talked about the podcast, talks about the running a club, talks about some of the skills that are kind of working both ways, helping both aspects, sort of thing. So that was good. Got lots of questions. So I think that's kind of my judgment of how well it went. I think I had about 20, 25 people come along to the talk. It was done online. Nowadays the world of work is very much via the computer. But yeah, got lots of questions. Part of what I did was I did a little recording. I thought, well, let's just actually, do a recording of some radios. People can actually get a flavour of it. So the night before, I did a little recording on my phone of a QSO between someone in Kuwait and someone in Virginia. So I think people thought that was pretty cool. I said, look, I did that using a wire, just down my garden. So nothing particularly clever. That was the aerial. And I thought people thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, lots of questions. One was about, I think it was something like, what was the most interesting conversation you ever heard? And I forgot to say it. So I put it into the chat window afterwards. I said, well, look, one time I was driving to work and I heard these American accents on the on a frequency that I wouldn't normally receive from the States. And then I realised I was just listening to the astronauts on the ISS, and people thought that was pretty cool. So I think that went very well. And you can always sort of tell things if you've got people interested because they ask you questions. If you don't get any questions or people are very quiet, you may have lost the audience. So I thought that was pretty good. Other stuff I have, talking of SDRs, I bought from, should we say, a Chinese online retailer, a device called an SI4732, I think that's right, which is a little receiver, tiny little receiver actually. It kind of fits in the palm of your hand, picks up all the HF bands, it picks up their various broadcast bands, including the FM broadcast band, It decodes SSB, it decodes FM, AM. I don't think it does CW for some reason, but obviously you can still hear CW if you tune to SSB. And it actually works very well. It's battery. It's got a battery inside it. You can charge it off USB, and it actually works using an ESP32 microcontroller. So it's kind of programmed using that. And I think there's various different versions of the firmware out there. I've not had much chance to play with it. I might do that a little bit more. It comes with an aerial. In fact, the one I got came with two aerials, one telescopic aerial, and then another one which is kind of a circular thing, not pretty small, but I was just playing with it as you were talking there on mute. I was on mute, so you couldn't hear what was going on, but I was picking up Morse code on 40 meters on an aerial that's fits in the palm of my hand. So that's it's obviously not brilliant, but I was actually able to pick up some signals just inside doing that. So it looks like it's quite sensitive. So I might have a little play with it. Might be an interesting sort of thing to take out and about. You can sling it in your bag and it doesn't take up too much space. So that's kind of it from me, Martin. That's what I've been up to.
Well, you've been a busy bunny. You have been a busy bunny, and that's good. And thing. Well, I've been busy pretty much for over a month on these first two things I'm talking about, but they've come to fruition fairly soon after. I did write to the ARDC and asked them if I could have join their 44net program, and I now have a IP tunnel from my network out to the real world that bypasses my carrier grade netting on the network I have at home. So now what that allows me to do, I'll tell you in a minute. Took a fair while to get it going, but once the people were talking to me and I got the right information to them, then it moved reasonably well. But it took probably about 3 weeks to get the information from start to scratch. I know Ed Durrant said it took him a little while as well, but it's not something that happens instantly. What I wanted the tunnel for is I thought I'd have a look at All-Star Link and the analog radio onto a hotspot and out onto the internet. Now, mine is now working. It's taken me best part a month to get mine working. And I'm sure half of you are going to sit there and think, he must be a total idiot. He doesn't understand anything. Well, nicely, I found so many conflicting pieces of information out on the internet on how to get it to work. And I got the tunnel working to bypass the carrier grade NAT. But I still couldn't connect to, the only two things I could connect to was the Parrot in Texas and UK HubNet. Nothing else would connect. And it took me a while to realise that I wasn't registered on the network. So I wrote to the help desk group and said, I'm not registered on the network. Can you point me in the right direction? Blah, blah, blah. Well, the All-Star Link help group is really helpful, because they just wrote back, RTFM, read the manual. Well, I've been reading the manual for weeks. I did find what the problem was, and I have got it working now. But no thanks to them for their help. It kind of works quite well, and I still think that Andy's Pi-Star program is far easier to set up and get working. It's far more logical than All-Star. But it works now. I've also managed to get VPNs working so I can connect back into my house from externally. So when I was in Ireland with Colin, I can now get back to my house through the carrier grade NAT to get files off my file server and things like that. Moving on, I've been also repairing some computers and various bits and pieces here that have had all sorts of problems. And I've built another Pi ready to become a hotspot. More on that another time, because that one will probably go to Colin. Worked on the talk group, had a few contacts on the talk group, and this Saturday, unfortunately, it's the Saturday that before the podcast is released, but I've put it out all over the internet on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, that the ICQPodcast digital talk group are having their net. This one's between 1300 and 1700. Please check our website because the times are on there for the rest of the year, and it's always going to be the first Saturday of the month. So first Saturday month, this Saturday we're on. And last but not least, I have booked for next Wednesday the 11th a talk to do to Pennine Hams on my how to build a QMX Plus. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. When I did it for Sutton and Cheam, Chris managed to get Hans Summers to come along to the presentation. But Hans is a nice guy, and I've known Hans a long time. And I'm sure he felt I was totally fair about it, because I tell it like it is, but I couldn't find anything wrong with it, quite honestly. So that's what I've been up to. Going forward, as I say, this weekend there's the talk group, and next Wednesday I'm doing a talk for Pennine Hams. And guys, just to save you, if you didn't listen to part of the round table, Sunday the 15th is Mother's Day. Do not get yourself into trouble by forgetting your mother. So
let's point out that's in the UK. I think it's a different date in the States, isn't it?
Possibly, but I'm not.
So we don't want to confuse folks.
Okay, well, certainly for the UK, us UK guys,
it could be a nice surprise for mothers in the States if they suddenly got loads of presents.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Okay, I've just checked. It's May the 10th in the States. So there you go. You've got your warning now.
Yeah, so early, and possibly other parts of the world, but certainly in the UK, 15th of March, which would have been my mum's birthday if she was still with us. Right. All that's left to me to do now is thank you guys for turning up. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'd like to thank Mr. Rothwell, M0SGL.
Thank you. It's been fun.
I hope so. I'd also like to thank Mr. Frank Hell, K4FMH.
Thank you, Martin. Great time as always.
I'm sure we've all enjoyed ourselves, I know. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems at all. And Mr. Bill Barnes, as I say, had to pop out. So thanks, Bill, for joining us. And hopefully you'll join us the next time as well. So all that's left for me to do is say 73 to you guys, and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73 all.
73.
Yeah.
Cheerio.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here about the European Space Agency, and they're creating an opportunity for students and amateurs to get involved with an Astro Pi Mission Zero Challenge, which will be taking place on the 23rd of March 2026. Now this is in conjunction with Sophie Adenot, Kilo Juliet 5 Lima Tango November, who's currently on board the International Space Station following her launch on the SpaceX Crew 12 mission that docked last month. So basically this is in partnership with the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and it gives everyone a chance to run some code in space. Participants write a short Python program that reads data from the Astro Pi colour and a luminosity sensor aboard the ISS, and use it to set the background colour of a personalised image display for the astronauts as they go about their daily tasks inside the Columbus Laboratory module. So more information about this for you on ICQPodcast.com, but certainly an interesting project to get involved in. The Radio Amateurs of Canada have announced the recipients of the Amateur of the Year Award for the last year. We honour Fred VE1 Foxtrot Alpha and Helen VA1 Yankee Lima. They are a couple, they're the Archibalds, and they're recognised for their dedication to the amateur radio hobby. They've been pillars of amateur radio in Canada for decades, and whilst the award traditionally reflects contribution in a given year, their sustained excellence in 2025, along with their lifetime of service, made them compelling joint recipients. So say they are avid organisers of the expeditions, and along with that, Fred is an instructor and technological innovator, and Helen is the president of the Canadian Ladies Amateur Radio Association. So deserved recipients, and congratulations to Fred and Helen. The Dog Day Radio Amateur Club, best known for its participation in the International Dog Day each August, will be calling CQing tribute to dogs who have supported members of the military over recent years. This event will be taking place on the 12th and 13th of March, so next weekend as we record, and will be active on the HF bands using CW and single sideband, commemorating the K9 Veterans Day. So if you want to get involved in that, keep an ear out for that, and you can certainly work, those stations there. Right, now we head over to our features episode, where it's the first of our requested manufacturer question and answers days, where we talk to Hans Summers of QRP Labs and put your questions to him. I hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Well, hi guys, for this feature, we talked about doing manufacturers Q&As, and the first manufacturer we contacted was QRP Labs, and Mr. Hans Summers of QRP Labs, call sign G0UPL, kindly agreed to do this conversation with us. So, I welcome you for a chat, Hans.
Thank you, Martin. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, well, it is fair. I mean, we do to spend a fair amount of time chatting, and when I see you, usually if it's at a rally, you're usually absolutely wrecked by the end of a rally, because I know everybody talks to you. But I was lucky to catch up with you at the RSGB convention last year, and you did give me a fair extra amount of time.
Oh, the RSGB convention is a very nice event for me because it's unlike Dayton or Friedrichshafen where I'm running a booth, and it's incredibly hectic. Whereas at the RSGB, you've just got time to listen and chat, and it's great.
Yeah. I think you got some great feedback there. So, we asked our listeners to supply us with some questions they wanted to ask you, and we've come up with half a dozen questions. And looking at them, I could probably answer some of them myself for you, but I'm not going to, Hans. Having built a QMX Plus, I thoroughly enjoyed building that, and you did attend one of my presentations on how to build it, which was enjoyable. Anyway, to start with, hi Greg, Kilo Mike 5 Golf Tango. My apologies. I mislaid your audio file. Totally my fault. My apologies. And we would have put this question to Hans.
Hi Hans, this is Greg, Kilo Mike 5 Golf Tango. Thank you for taking my question. Do you have any plans to include a waterfall display in any of your radios?
But hopefully I can answer the question for you, having spoke to Hans a number of times, not only on this recording, but other times. Hans is kind of in a different part of the market. I would never say never with Hans. He's a very clever guy, but he doesn't like talking about future developments because they put him under immense pressure. When he mentioned he was going to do the SSB version of the software for the QMX Plus, he got hammered for the best part of a year with people saying, when's it happening? When's it happening? So, nicely, I wouldn't write Hands off on this one, but if he does go for that, you're going to have to have a much different display than we've got now. You won't be able to have the 16-character 2-line display, and that will put the price of the kit up, not significantly, but it's a thought. So I wouldn't write it off. A very, very good question, and sorry it didn't get to Hans. That was my fault. Mr. Stuart Bryant, G3YSX, asks, where do you think polar modulation will go next? Is the technology only suitable for prime movers, brackets, transceivers, without a linear, or does the future have any add-ons for linears? So I don't know. I'll let you answer that one because you know more about polar modulation than I do, Hans.
Well, Stuart did ask me this at the RSGB convention, so he's probably just checking up on me to see if I've had any more thoughts on it. It can be used in add-on linear amplifiers, and the original 1952 paper by Caryn in IE paper about polar modulation, which was called Envelope Illumination and Restoration at that point. The clue is kind of in the title of the paper, because that paper was based on taking an existing SSB signal and decomposing it into phase and amplitude components, which you would then be able to modulate those separately to a much higher power level. So there's no reason why technically it couldn't be done. It is slightly different from what I did in the QMX, where you're actually taking audio from the microphone and you've already got that in its sort of basic components. You don't have to start with an existing, say, 10-watt SSB signal and somehow extract that from that the phase and the amplitude. So it is a different thing. The QMX just takes that microphone audio level and does all the processing digitally to come out with a phase and amplitude modulation and then feeds those to the modulators. So yes, I think it can be done. Whether or not it does get done is an interesting question. We have to see where polar modulation goes. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this. Flex are very strongly emphasizing the efficiency benefits of the Aurora 500, which reaches something around 85-90% efficiency of RF power output compared to DC power input or normal grid power input. But I think there are other benefits as well. The simplicity of achieving a given level of performance is arguably higher because you're not having to deal with these transistors and their curved characteristics. Everything can be nonlinear amplifiers. So I think there are a lot of benefits, and I think the industry should be looking a lot more at polar modulation. The other big manufacturers should be looking at it, and that may well include add-on linear amplifiers as well as transceivers. It'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is good, Hans, and in some ways you're ahead of the curve because you've got polar modulation running in a couple of your kits, which are great. And going forward, I think that it's a bit like going from AM to SSB. You know, it probably took a lot of people and a lot of manufacturers a long time to switch from AM to SSB in the early days because it was something new, and probably a lot of manufacturers are sitting there going, well, how long can I put it off before people rough me out for it? So,
I mean, there is a tendency for everybody to just do what they've done before and make minor iterations to it. I did a little analysis a few months back where I looked at all the schematics I could find of the big main flagship transceivers of Yaesu and ICOM and Kenwood and Ellercraft. And they're all using a pair of push-pull Mitsubishi RF MOSFET transistors in linear mode. And so everyone's kind of doing the same thing because that's what they know and that's what works. And there is a tendency to keep on doing that. But the benefits of polar modulation in terms of higher efficiency, lower cost, higher performance are so significant that I think that people probably will be moving towards it. As you said, it's just a question of how long they can keep doing the old thing before they get kicked too badly about it.
Yeah. And I assume that, you know, with the big manufacturers, they've probably got rigs in production. They're building them, designing and building them probably 2 or 3 years before we actually get them in the shops. So it would take them a lot longer to move to a new technology than, say, somebody like yourself who's very much at the cutting edge.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see. It'll be fun.
Well, I think that was a good answer, Hans. Mr. Tim Price, who is one of the Sutton and Sheen members, G4YBU, he asks, what type of soldering iron would you suggest? And he says, do I need to buy a soldering iron with a small tip to build the QMX Plus?
This is a question that comes up a lot from our builders. And there are 2 parts to it, the solder and the soldering iron. So let's deal with the soldering iron first. The QMX Plus and the QMX are both made on 6-layer PCBs. So you've got the top and the bottom layer of copper, which you can actually see, but there's also 4 layers inside. And the way I design these things, because I'm always very concerned about making things compact, cost-effective, and so on. And I design these things to have as maximum area of ground plane as possible. And what this also means, so you get very nice RF performance. And in the QMX and the QMX Plus, 2 of those layers are just pure ground plane. There's no tracks on them at all. And then there's frequent stitching of the ground planes with ground wires between the 6 layers. But what this means, the unpleasant side effect of this, means that they take a lot of heat away from the soldering iron. So it's like trying to solder something to a big copper plate. It will suck away the heat very quickly. So I do strongly recommend a sufficiently powerful soldering iron. We use 60 watt or 80 watt soldering irons, and that seems to work very well. In terms of the soldering iron tip, a lot of people think, I'm soldering these small devices, small components, I should get a fine soldering iron tip. I do not suggest a fine soldering iron tip. And the reason for this is that if you have a very thin tip, like a point or something, the heat can't get through that small area of metal quick enough to keep the temperature of your joint hot enough. And it becomes very difficult to do anything. So I recommend using a larger soldering iron tip. I use at least a 2.5 millimeter chisel tip. And at points where you feel that you need to have a finer precision, you can always twist it so that you're just soldering with one corner of that tip. But then you've got the much larger surface area, the larger area of tip volume to get the heat through from the soldering iron heating element to the joint. And I think that's really important. It's a big mistake to use a soldering iron tip that's very, very thin. And on all of these kits, the surface mount devices have already been soldered for you by factory assembly machines. So you never have to solder anything anyway that has less than a 0.1 inch pitch. So all of the components have that sort of minimum size, 0.1 inches. There's no need really to have a very, very fine tip. You're not soldering SMD components anyway. So that's what I would suggest, a 60 or 80 watt iron and at least a 2 millimeter chisel tip thing. Temperature controlled irons are so inexpensive these days that we typically here, all of my team here who do the assembly of the assembled radios, they use a temperature controlled iron. They're a lot cheaper than they used to be. We don't spend very much money on soldering irons. I was always an Antex fan going back many, many decades, but at some point I found that their reliability decreased, and I had the first one I had for about 25 years, and the second one only lasted about 2 years, so I thought something had changed in that time. And so we just buy the cheapest, nastiest soldering irons that we can find, and if they break quickly, at least they didn't cost too much in first place. So we never spend more than about $10 on soldering irons. But 60 to 80 watts and a good size tip is my recommendation. For the solder, a lot of people have bad experiences of using lead-free solder. So I've never tried lead-free solder, I have to say. I always just use the normal leaded solder, and so does the team here when they assemble them. So it's a 6733 mix or whatever it is. And so the circuit boards themselves are assembled in the factory using lead-free solder, which is the standard these days. But it doesn't seem to cause any problem soldering normal solder on the regular boards. But I definitely think leaded solder is the better option, because people have a lot of trouble with lead-free solder. And just a couple of tips about the soldering. I think, keep your iron, don't be scared to keep the iron on the joint for quite a few seconds until you can see the solder flow nicely around all the required lead of the component and get a good joint. The QMX Plus kit did get easier to build because now the capacitors are actually SMD instead of through-hole. The original reason for using through-hole capacitors on the QMX, which is the smaller brother of the QMX Plus, the question was about QMX Plus, is that we have 3 different band versions, 80 to 20 meters, 60 to 15 meters, and 20 to 10 meters. And all of those 3 versions have different sets of capacitors. So we wanted to make only one board that you just build it for the version by choosing the right capacitors or supplying the right capacitors. But because QMX Plus covers all of 160 meters to 6 meters, and the capacitors are always the same for every QMX Plus, those are now SMD. And those were one of the hardest parts to solve because in the low pass filters, one side of each of those capacitors goes to ground. And in the area of the low pass filters, there are no SMD components or ICs. And so you've got even bigger area of ground plane. So all of that was solved. And the QMX Plus is actually, I think, much easier to solder now than it used to be in the first revision. So yeah, just to summarize, 60 to 80 watt iron, good size tip, not small, so something like 2 millimeters something, chisel tip, and leaded solder.
Yeah, well, I've still got leaded solder, and yeah, I agree with everything you said, Hans. You know, you've got to have an iron with enough heat in the tip. I've seen so many people mess things up and make a right mess of the board if you don't have your iron hot enough. The other thing is, just because your iron melts solder, you switch it on your melt solder, it ain't ready to use for at least another 5 minutes. You've got to build a reservoir of heat up in the tip. That's where I'd go with that one. But I agree with everything you said, Hans. Yes, I used the temperature controlled iron when I did mine.
Well, the other question that people have is what temperature should they set? And for the cheap, nasty irons that we use here, it's almost irrelevant to ask that question because I'm pretty sure that the accuracy of the tiny little LCD on the hand of the iron is so poor that it doesn't make any difference anyway. But I have a soldering iron station. I set mine to 350 centigrade, and there is a temptation to set it for higher temperature. And it does help sometimes if you're at a higher temperature and you're trying to solder a joint on a ground connection and it's going to suck the heat out a lot, then it does help to have a bit higher temperature so that you've got some room before the temperature drops to where the solder won't melt anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hans, so everything on that. And in fairness, I built mine with my temperature controlled Weller iron. And in fairness, I had it set to 400, but it melted the solder quickly and it was hot. And, you know, you get in and out quick with a hot iron. You can get in and out quick. You cause less problems and you make a better joint. So, yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Hans. Okay. These were for a couple from YouTube, but they were a little bit anonymous, so I'm not sure who they came from. What would be cool is to have a radio able to modulate Class D amplifiers so that you can run a 100-watt amplifier. Well, I said to you before we started, the name of QRP Labs is kind of telling you you're a QRP manufacturer, although, you know, you tell me you have a 50-watt amp. What's the ideas of potential having a linear for Class D?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a 10-watt linear amplifier and kit, and we also have a 50-watt amplifier for CW, so it's a non-linear kit. I'm not against a little bit more power than QRP, and I wouldn't rule out anything in the 100-watt category in the future. I agree, it would be very cool to have an external Class D amplifier. There are no external Class D amplifiers on the market for amateur radio at the moment, which also kind of comes back to Stuart's question from before. I think you have two ways to consider this. If you wanted to feed an external Class D amplifier, you might be in a situation where you already had separate phase and amplitude components, such as in a QMX Plus, that you could use that signal directly to drive a Class D amplifier rather than need to decompose into phase and amplitude again and modulate them separately again. So there could be some advantage. If you already had a polar modulation transceiver like a QMX, there could be some advantage to being able to drive an external amplifier in Class D. So it's another way to do it, certainly. Another exciting thing to explore. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Oh, yeah. And the other one mentioned, and looks like a lot of people are wanting you to go to 100 watts, because another one from the YouTube Anonymous was, yeah, I know your main focus is QRP equipment, but had you any plans of selling transceivers with a high power output? How about 100 watts?
Yeah, I mean, as I said just now, I wouldn't rule that out, and I don't know where the next few years will take us. I'm still at the moment exploring a lot of firmware development for QMX and QMX Plus. There's still a lot that I want to do to finish those off, the firmware is nowhere near what I would consider to be finished. Whereas you look at something like QCX, the CW single band transceiver, there haven't been any firmware updates for quite some time on that. And there are no sort of major bugs or nothing else particularly that I want to put into that. But QMX is still something that has a lot of work, in my opinion, needs to be done on it. And so I don't know where things will go in the future. And I wouldn't rule out going to 100 watts. And as you said, a lot of people have been asking questions. Like, how many is that? We've had 3 already.
Yeah.
And so I think, for a very, very long time, for half a century, the standard sort of amateur radio transceiver has been a black box that you sit on your table and that produces 100 watts power output. And it's kind of the standard thing for amateur radio. So it's not really surprising that people think of that. And people are suffering, I think, from more man-produced noise. And so it gets harder and harder to communicate, and more power does help with that. And so it's not really surprising, I suppose, that people think of that. And especially when you've got Flex, you've got their 500 watt polar modulation Aurora transceiver. So, yeah, I mean, it's something I would consider, I think. Not in the immediate future. I have too many things to do on QMX, but who knows? It may come further down, a few years down the road.
One of the things I like very much about my QMX Plus is that you do quite frequently release updates to the firmware, either adding new features or you know, in fairness, and let's get over this, guys, there's always going to be a bug in software somewhere, or it doesn't quite do what you think. But you don't just leave it. The big manufacturers, that you're lucky to get one update in the lifetime of the radio. You're adding features all the time, which is exciting. And that's one of the things that I like about the QMX Plus. It's not a stagnant device once built. That's it. It is moving on. So, yeah, I think you do a great job there.
Well, I think that a lot of the big manufacturers, it's a very different situation to what it is with QRP Labs, where everything is driven by me. And my reason for doing anything tends to be, wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be cool to have a radio that did that? And so I'm kind of driven by things that are cool, and I want to keep developing to put more functionality in the radio. And there's still a lot of things I want to put in QMX Plus transceivers. Eventually they will, I guess, reach a level where they have somewhat matured and most people have got what they're asking for, and most of the big bugs have been resolved, and like the other products have, like the QCX has, and lastly the QDX. There haven't been so many updates on the QDX digital transceiver recently either. So things do reach a level of maturity where you've done everything you can think of that would be cool to put in them, but QMX has a long way to go before it reaches that point. I think it's a really nice platform, being able to do everything with software-defined radio, where you can incorporate all these new features just with software updates.
Yeah,
and of course, it's a very easy thing to do the software update because it just appears on the PC as a USB flash drive, and you copy in the new firmware file. So that also makes it very convenient for people to be able to do the firmware upgrade. It's not some scary thing requiring any particular software or hardware to be able to do.
Certainly is, and as I say, I enjoy it. Now, the next question, I've got a feeling I know who sent this one in, but the gentleman down there in Australia is one of our listeners. It might have been him. He said, a number of us don't like winding toroids. Could there be an extra option for purchasing kits with pre-wound toroids? Toroids are not that difficult, but I'll go with his question.
He didn't say they were difficult. He said he didn't like them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I had been asked this before because we offer the QRP Labs transceivers, QCX, QDX, and QMX transceivers, both as a kit and as an assembled, tested transceiver, complete assembled, tested transceiver. And in some ways, yes, you could have sort of a halfway option where you've wound the toroids for people. The toroid winding is a very, very manual process, and it probably takes up about half the time of making the transceiver. It's not really unpleasant or difficult. You only have to be able to count. And if you do it while you're doing something else, it kind of can reduce the tedium of winding the toroids. The difficulty, I think, with us providing an option for purchasing kits with pre-wound toroids is that sooner or later you get into it's a general problem with providing options on a product. The more options you have for a product, the harder it gets to manage it, and the more the price goes up as well. And one of the nicest things about QMX Plus, there aren't different band versions, so it makes it very easy for me to manufacture it. But the more options you have for something, the more complicated your logistics get, because you run out of things at different times and you have to order things from different places. And it does drive up the complexity of the operation quite a lot. And so I'm kind of hesitant always to thinking of too many options. And you might get into a situation where people wanted, the toroids and this and that. And my team in the office will be messaging me every day, what should we quote people as the assembly fee, because he wants to do some of it himself and not the rest of it. I know, we're only talking about one halfway point of just having all the toroids done. I mean, it's not impossible. I'm not terribly enthusiastic about it. I don't know how popular it would be. There is a guy as well, by the way, in America who winds toroids for people, and his cost of winding toroids is quite similar to the cost of the entire additional assembly fee cost of the QRP Labs kit. But he does produce a set for QMX and QMX Plus. He produced toroids for Elecraft as well, I think, and anybody who needs toroids, he makes toroids for them. He winds them all by hand. He sits there, and that's his living, winding toroids for people. I'll have to think about it some more, but so far haven't liked the idea of adding one more option just for toroids, because once you've got that far, you've got halfway through the kit anyway. I don't know, what was your experience, Martin? Did you feel that that's accurate? It takes about half the time to wind the toroids?
In fairness, Hans, I didn't time myself.
I thought you were going to tell me you told your wife to wind the toroids.
What's that? Oh, no. Hey, I'm not that brave. No, in fairness, I found when building your QMX Plus, I sat back. You have to be in the right frame of mind. Sit down quietly, have a cup of your favourite brew, tea or coffee, and just wind one or two toroids. Don't try and wind all 20 plus of them, because that's when you get frustrated in one thing and another. But just sit back, maybe put your favourite music on quietly in the background, and you just sit there and you do a few. And then you have a break and you do another few. Nicely, and I mean this nicely, Hans, because I know you build QMX Pluses ready built for customers. But your time limit or your time scale of producing them, you could actually get the kit and build it quicker than Hans's team could build it, because they're building so many of them for people who won't build it. So you would get your QMX quicker. But if you don't like winding toroids, bite the bullet and ask Hans's team to build the thing for you. That's where I go with that one, nicely. Yeah, you're right. Winding toroids, it's not difficult. I think initially people look at the number of toroids and panic a little bit. But I know I spoke to members of our club, Saturn and Sheen, and those that were going to order a fully built one from you after the presentation, sorry, Hans, I cost you a bit of money, they decided to build the kit. So that was a good one. So
sometimes people also ask me, why do you use toroids rather than these axial molded inductors that you can buy? And the answer to that is that those molded inductors, they're basically a very, very tiny tube of ferrite material with a high permeability, with the wire around it cylindrically, and they don't have the same level of performance in a transceiver as toroids. And this is why when you open up even any major manufacturer's transceiver, you will see Torres inside, because they achieve a much higher performance, lower loss, and they have also these self-shielding properties, so they can be mounted quite close together without interfering with each other. Not last year, I think the year before it, I went to the GQRP Club convention in Telford, and I couldn't help myself. There was a guy, Phoenix Kits, selling this 20-meter transceiver there, a 1 or 2 watts transceiver, and I built that kit, and it uses radial inductors. And this is I'm not trying to criticize at all, because, he was specifically trying to avoid toroid winding for people who are scared of winding toroids. But just for fun, when I got home, I built it and measured it and characterized and everything. And then I changed those low-pass filter inductors to toroids and remeasured everything. And the performance improvement in terms of efficiency, power output, and harmonic attenuation was extremely stark. And so you're kind of stuck with these toroids as a manufacturer because you want the performance, even though they're the most time-consuming thing to produce. And there's no really good automated way of doing it either. You can buy these extremely expensive toroid winding machines, but they, I think, take longer to prepare per toroid than it would break even on about the 20 or 25 tone toroid. And so it's a kind of unpleasant fact of radios that you need toroids. I think the best thing, as you said, is just bite the bullet and do a few at a time.
Yeah.
And don't be scared of them. My kids have wound toroids during some holidays. They were bored and they came and built QDXs and they wound the toroids and did the soldering.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, just do a few at a time. Just do a few at a time. Sit back and enjoy the build process. It's not a race. If it takes you 2 weeks and it takes me 3 weeks, we both end up, as long as we end up with a working rig at the end of it, what's the problem? Yeah.
And why are you building it anyway? You're not building it to save very much money, because the extra cost of the assembled one is not very much anyway. You're building it for your enjoyment and the challenge and the enjoyment. And you get this pleasure from operating something that works and that you've built yourself. It's a very special, unique thrill that you get when you're the one who soldered that thing together.
Yeah.
And people even get this when they build their furniture. They call it the IKEA effect. Just because you bought this flat pack furniture and you came home and put it together yourself, you may have sworn at it a bit during the process, but you end up loving that piece of furniture because you put something of yourself into it. And so it's definitely worth doing, I think.
Certainly is. And when you show people, I mean, I got pictures of the inside of my QMX, and I'm a member of a repair cafe, and I went to the repair cafe, and the guy said, "Can you solder?" And I said, "I'll show you some of my work." And I showed him the inside of the QMX, and he went, "QMX Plus." He went, "Okay, I'm not going to discuss that anymore with you." So, enjoy the process is where I go. Now, last question, Hans. This is a bit of a generic question, but what are the minimum tools required to build your kits? What is the skill level required for each kit? And this would help new hams to ensure that they build kits correctly. I think what the guy was possibly trying to discuss is having like a badge or a logo next to the kit saying easy build, easy this, I think, but maybe I'm preempting your answer.
One of the things that really turned out to be very popular about the kits was the built-in test equipment that I included. And going back to the QCX transceiver came about in early 2017 when I got an email from the RSGB and they were looking for build-a-thon suggestions for the Yota summer camp, which was going to be held in August in 2017. So you end up with 2 or 3 participants from each Region 1 ITU country going to the UK in the summer. And one of the activities they did with this summer camp And I had this vision that they would all be sort of lined up in some gigantic hall somewhere, and there would be some helpers going around trying to help people to build something. And many of these youngsters probably didn't ever do any assembly before and needed some assistance and everything. And I had this terrible idea that the poor helpers would be running around like headless chicken trying to help so many youngsters at a time to get these things working. And there was no way that they were all going to have separate oscilloscopes and signal generators and things. And I had built kits before, and you typically came to a point in the kit construction where the instructions would say, okay, now you inject a signal from your signal generator, or you look at the output on your oscilloscope. And I was always kind of thinking, well, what if you don't have a signal generator or an oscilloscope and you want to minimize the amount of equipment that is necessary? And those were the reasons why I included all this internal test equipment in the QCX. So you could do all the alignments and adjustments without any additional equipment. And it was just a simple, practical choice, but it became something that the kit was known for, that it had all this stuff built in and that people loved. And so I continued that with the QDX and the QMX, and they have all these built-in tools where you can run the sweep of the bandpass filter and you can do all the adjustments just with the built-in tools. So for this reason, you don't need things like an oscilloscope or a signal generator. If you end up debugging something that doesn't work, then that's a different question. An oscilloscope can be useful for that. But for the basic assembly of the kit, you don't need very much test equipment to go with it. And pretty much the only things you need are a good sharp wire cutter, a good soldering iron, and some screwdrivers. I think a DMM, just for checking continuity through the toroids to make sure that you've burned or scraped off the enamel from the soldering wire, from the enameled wire during soldering sufficiently to get a good solder joint. I think that is a very useful thing, and we recommend that in the manual. But just these very basic tools, I think, are enough. Screwdrivers to bolt everything together at the end in its enclosure, the soldering iron, DMM. As far as skill is required, that does depend on the kit that you're building, and different people also have a different opinion about what is a difficult kit and what is an easy kit. But it might be an idea. I mean, I haven't done it so far, but it might be an idea, as you said, to have something next to each kit on the website saying whether it is an easy kit or intermediate kit or a difficult kit. I think the most important thing is to follow the instructions very carefully. I do put a lot of effort into the instructions, partly for selfish reasons, because I don't want too many people coming back to me with questions. Why doesn't it work? What did I do wrong? And if I make the instructions as detailed as possible, that's avoided. So I think it's very important to follow the instructions step by step and don't try and get ahead of yourself or skip things or think that you know already how to do something. It's better to read every single detail. And if people follow those instructions carefully, step by step, and with care, then I don't think particularly a very high level of skill and expertise is required to build any of the kits. I would say that the QMX is very much more compact than a QMX Plus, and so it would help to have had some soldering experience before attempting to build a QMX, because everything is very close together and you're nearby, where you're soldering is near to SMD components that you could damage and things like that. But a QMX Plus is, I think, a really ideal project even for a beginner. And the toroid, once you've counted the toroids turns, that's the hard part, or tedious part, if you like. But the rest of it is just connecting the connectors, soldering on the connectors, the transistors, the pin switching diodes and inductors for the low-pass filter switching, and then the mechanical assembly of the front panel and the buttons and rotary encoders and LCD. But there's nothing in there that's really, really hard. But there's nothing in there that's really hard to do and requires any special skill. So I would suggest, if you're a beginner and you think you can follow the instructions and be a detail-orientated constructor who doesn't hop ahead, then the QMX Plus is a very good kit for that. if you wanted to build the QMX, I think it would be helpful to not have done that as your first kit, because things are closer together. It's not that there are more components, but everything is very, very close together and compact in a QMX. So really, it's kind of the size of a deck of cards. And so things are necessarily very compact inside. But on the QMX Plus, I think you have got space. But again, as you were saying earlier, Martin, taking your time over it and not rushing it is so important, and following the instructions well, and, give yourself a peaceful, quiet place where you're not going to be too distracted. All of these things contribute to a successful build just as much as skill and experience does. So I would really don't underestimate the importance of just, be careful, following the instructions, giving yourself peace and quiet, not rushing. These things are all very important. But yeah, you don't need very, very many tools to assemble a QMX Plus kit. And I don't know what you think, Martin. You've just built yours recently. There's the screwdrivers, soldering iron, wire cutters. Sharp wire cutters, I think, are good, because one of the mistakes sometimes people make, if they have blunt wire cutters, you end up trying to yank the pin, the wire you've just cut, just soldered. You try and yank it to get to trim it, and that can then cause tracks to lift and joints to be broken and things. So a good sharp wire cutters, I think, is a good one. And it took me 2 hours, 20 minutes recently. I built the QMX Plus. And you've got to remember, I'm not really that experienced at building QMX Pluses. I built maybe 2 or 3 in my life. But I wanted to get a feel for how long it should take our team in the office, who've built hundreds. So I should be establishing a lower bound. But 2 hours, 20 minutes. But, if you were going to read the instructions every page and take it carefully, and it could take a lot longer, and that would be perfectly fine. It's about enjoying it, I think. Is there anything you think I've missed, Martin, or anything else I could?
I agree with everything you said there, Hans. Sit back, enjoy yourself. Now, what Hans did say is, RTFM, read the funny manual. I have to own up. I did make a mistake building mine, and mine didn't work initially. And I was just about to email Hans saying, hey, I've got a duff board. And I reread the instructions. I'd missed one vital sentence that said do something, and once I did that, I'd actually found it back to that problem and knew what the problem was and knew how to fix it. And I thought, I'll just phone Hans and let him know. And I read the manual, and oh damn, I missed an instruction. So the instruction manuals are really, really good.
Are you going to tell us which instruction you missed, Martin?
Yeah, well, as I say, I got.
You've come this far with all this disclosure, so
yeah. But I'm being honest about it. I made a mistake. Number 2, if you haven't done soldering before, then what I would suggest, if you've never soldered, find somebody who knows how to solder properly and get them to teach you. It won't take more than half an hour. Buy yourself a few random components at a rally and a bit of circuit board. Maybe, or even if you find something on a scrap heap with a surface board, take it apart, take it home, take the components out, and then refit the components. You can practice soldering.
Yeah, I was going to say, Martin, it's very hard for me to remember back to when I couldn't solder, because I think I could probably solder before I could walk. But I remember in those days, I used to dismantle an awful lot of things, and that was very educational. And because I had no money at all when I was growing up, I used to salvage all the components from old TVs and cassette recorders and things like that. And even desoldering is also teaching you soldering techniques.
Yes,
that will help when soldering as well.
Yeah. So I think we've covered a lot of ground here today, and I'm very pleased this went this well. Hans, one last thing. Is there anything else you want to tell us before you leave?
I have taken, over the last few years, an approach that if I'm working on something new, whether it be a new product or a new software feature, I try to keep it to myself because otherwise the pressure is immense and it never happens. We've spoken about this before, Martin, I know, but it's worth saying again. To be able to produce any of these designs, and even in the case of firmware, it does require an awful lot of time and effort, and it requires a clean mind to do that. And so I tend to these days not give any advance notification of what I've been working on.
Yeah.
But yes, there's still a lot of stuff to come for the QMX Plus, as I said earlier. So,
well, all that's left for me to do, Hans, is to thank you very much for the interview. And I'm sure our listeners will be very, very impressed. You can find Hans's company just by looking for QRP Labs on any internet browser. And Hans has got a whole raft of kits and bits and pieces there, as well as the QMX Plus that I've talked about today. And Hans, all I can do is wish you every success going forward, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, we do have a big range of kits there. It's definitely fair to say that the QMX and QMX Plus are the current flagship products, and recently we crossed the 15,000 mark for sales of QMX and QMX Plus kits. So that's more than 5,000 a year. That's since the launch in May 2023 at Dayton. And so it's certainly keeping me busy. You can imagine. So very honored to be your first manufacturer's Q&A as well, Martin. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good luck with your future interviews on the series as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Hans. And I'll say 73s. Look after yourself, and we'll see you at some point in time this year, I'm sure, at the rally.
Dayton, Friedrichshafen, somewhere, I'm sure. Take care, Martin. 73.
73.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our first manufacturer Q&A of 2025, and we thank Hans Summers of QRP Labs for taking part in this episode. And I say it won't be your only opportunity, I'm sure, to ask Hans questions. He's quite active at all the major ham fairs, and I'm sure we'll invite him back on the show very soon. So if you've got a question that's burning, as I say, let us know, or keep it for next time, and we'll certainly post that to Hans for you. Now, of course, if you found value from today's show and learnt something or was entertained, etc., we'd ask you to support us. Please visit ICQPodcast.com/donate, where say everything you send our way shows the value in the show, and say helps us to reinvest and put money back in the show and pay our way, etc. So please do consider us and support your ICQ podcast. Now, as always, we'd like to direct you to the ICQ Podcast Digital Group. Yesterday was our second net of the year, and really hope that everybody enjoyed it. And again, we've got more lined up for the rest of the year, so check out the ICQ Podcast webpage for when the net is coming your way next. Of course, we'd like to thank everyone who took part in the news roundtable with, say, Martin M1MRB. And as I say, I hope they've really given you some wonderful insights into, say, our hobby and what's going on from there. Right, well, we'll be back in a fortnight's time with the next episode of the ICQ Podcast. As always, I hope you continue to enjoy the hobby, have some fantastic fun, and we'll talk to you all again in a fortnight's time. 73's all.